baby. Yeah.
What's up? So you just saw that I squatted 507. Again, that's a weight that you've kind of probably started to see as a good working weight for me. A few weeks back I did 507 for 3. Today I did two full speed singles and then a pause rep. I consider this a progression in my training. I consider this a PR for where I am right now. Too often times guys get hyper focused on PRs as in weight on the bar, whereas I look at everything that I possibly can to be a PR. You know, I could even stay at 507 for 2 more waves and go 507 for a normal speed rep and 2 pauses, and then the next time do 3 pause reps, and I would still consider all of that progression because pause reps are harder than normal speed reps. So if I can continue to add more wrinkles or variables to what I'm doing to make them more challenging, the weight can stay the same on the bar. You know, for me, I've had arguments with lifters about this, but I firmly believe that if you go to the gym and let's say you bench 275 pounds and you do 2 repetitions and they're challenging, they're slow, and then you come back 3 to 4 weeks later and you do those same 2 reps again, but they're much improved, they're faster, they feel better, that in of itself is a PR. I consider quality of reps a PR. If you do a rep with poor form and then you come back and you do it with good form, that's a form PR. You know, if you pick up dumbbells and you do incline presses for 30 seconds and you get 18 reps, and then you go into the next wave and you do 30 seconds again and you get 19 reps, that's a PR. Or if you can press for 30 seconds and fail, and then the next time around you can push for 32 seconds, that's a PR. So I'm always trying to create new ways to keep my training moving forward without necessarily always putting more weight on the bar, because more weight on the bar, especially in a short time frame, guys want to accelerate that so much. That's how you get injured. You know, if you can handle the same weight better and better and better, that's also getting stronger. And I believe that that's a much safer way to progress in the long run. You know, there's only so much weight that can be added to the bar, and at some point, you know, bones break before steel bends. I've always said that, and I'm living proof of that. So I know the inclination is to always put more weight on the bar, but free yourself of that way of thinking and look at the way the rest of the world trains. Only in America are we so hyper obsessed with putting more weight on the bar. You know, Russian athletes, talking about the Chinese athletes, the athletes from the former communist bloc, especially in weightlifting, they're very content to stay at lower percentage ranges and just improve volume, improve the repetition work, improve the quality of form. And something else that I see here in the States over and over and over is that people will justify bad form to put more weight on the bar. And in reality, you're going to have paramount form if you're ever going to utilize or understand or actualize your form to be the best in the world. Look at Andrei Milanichev. If you look at anyone in the sport as a paramount form in the squat, that would be him. His form never breaks down because it's the same with an empty bar as it is with 485 kilos. He is a phenomenal testament to doing things the right way. You know, and we all, again, I talk about this all the time. Everybody in America watches him squat and they're like, why didn't he do more? Why didn't he do more? Because he's always staying a little bit behind his potential, because even if he's competing at 95%, he's still ahead of everyone else. But that 5% is a huge, the difference between 95% effort and 100% effort for a guy going from a 485 squat to say a 500 kilo squat, that extra 30 pounds or 15 kilos is going to be massive. The risk of injury is going to go up exponentially every single pound. So even though his capabilities are higher, he stays progressing because he's never tapping into that 100% potential, yet he's always moving forward. And I think sometimes here we forget that progress is the name of the game, not actualization. You know, how many times have you had these meets where, or maybe you haven't, or you just done it in the gym, where you go in, you get a gut-busting 100% PR, and then the next training cycle is awful, you know, because you actualized too early, you peaked out too early, and then you tried to build on something that was maybe because you'd had perfect meals, you slept well, you had a good day, and everything went right, and then you try to base your next training cycle off of that number rather than choosing a number that is something that you could do maybe not on your best day. That's why on the Q method and other methods like 5-3-1 or various other methods in powerlifting, we always go off of a 90% training max. So let's just say an example of an 800-pound squatter. We're pretty much going to be assured that an 800-pound squatter on competition day is capable of 90% any given day throughout his training cycle. That's 720 pounds. So if he were to come in the gym today and he was maybe a little bit tired, fatigued from the training week, and I looked at him and I said, okay, we're gonna work up today, we're gonna go up to 720. He would be able to do that. He would probably be able to go beyond that, but setting your training max at around 90% of your 1 rep max or your true max is going to keep you a lot safer. It's going to allow you to do more volume. It's going to allow you to not get beat up as quickly. So there's a reason why people have adhered to that. And overall, you know, talking Shako, Smolov, the Q method, fifth set, 5-3-1, if you're an athlete, the percentage that you want to strive for, you know, as far as weight to reps ratio throughout the course of your training cycle is 68% of a training max. That's what for an athlete, like a football player or, you know, rugby, whatever it might be, 68% is going to be in that area. General strength athletes are going to be about 70%. I tend to think for powerlifters it needs to be about 72%. And that's not based on my information. That's based on numerous sports scientists, coaches that are much smarter than me. Louis, I think, even creeps up to around 70 to 75%. He gives a little bit larger leeway there, but 72% is a good average. You know, that's where you're going to make your most progress, is around that percentage range. You're not going to get stronger by always pounding yourself, you know, with 100% max or 90% max. And that's why my training has looked really kind of boring from the outside looking in, because I'm just doing a lot of fundamental base work to build myself back up. And I think that's what gets lost on a lot of younger lifters, is so many times they want to do what guys at the top are doing. Well, when you watch Dan Green train, you know, he's like a human highlight reel, or a Kevin Oak, or any of these guys at the top now, but those are two guys that I communicate with pretty regularly, and you know, watch them train a lot. And if I can even get down watching their Instagrams, because it looks like they're always just doing heavyweight PRs all the time, left and right. But in reality, if you're around them and if you watch their training closely, and if you talk to them about the things that they don't post, the vast majority of their work is submaximal repetition work, you know, building themselves up. Both of those guys train very much like a bodybuilder after the main movement. They do a lot of repetition work for hypertrophy, and that's something that I've always adhered to as well, regardless of, you know, Kevin trains a little different than I do. We both train a little different than Dan does. You know, we're all doing different things, but it all comes back to the same thing. We're waiving our percentages, and we're also doing a lot of good hypertrophy work after the fact. The thing about accessory work for powerlifters, I've been in so many gyms where guys will go in and they'll do their main lift all out, and then they'll leave. Well, here's the secret. You know, everybody's always looking for a secret or a tip. The secret is everybody does the big stuff right. Everybody goes in and squats hard, benches hard, deadlifts hard, whatever. It's the progression that you make on your accessories that will make you a great lifter. It's the progression and understanding of where you are weak and addressing those weaknesses through hypertrophy that will allow the muscle bellies to grow. A larger muscle can handle more weight, yada, yada, yada. So you do need to work the muscles from the standpoint of a bodybuilder mindset. Some guys just don't want to do that. They think, you know, there's something wrong with going over 2 or 3 reps. Absolutely not. Like, after my work sets with my main lift, I like for bench press example, I like to do a ton of close grip volume for my triceps, and then I like to go into incline dumbbell work for volume. And I'm talking on the close grips, anywhere from 8 to 12 repetitions, and then on the incline dumbbells, which are still pretty heavy, like 100s to 150s, I'm doing anywhere from 20 to 30 repetitions there in those heavier weight ranges. So it just builds confidence, it builds more muscle, and it's a much safer way for me to go using those rep ranges and those dumbbell ranges and slowly working up, instead of going to, you know, straight to a 200-pound dumbbell where I can only get maybe 5 or 6 reps, something like that. I don't know. But I've always just believed in doing more rep work. I never thought you got ahead by doing less. And on that note, I know I'm kind of all over the place today, but I've been looking at some questions that I've gotten, and I think people are on the right path. But here's something that I'll tell you. We had a rule at most gyms that I've ever trained at, that if you're a young guy and you're coming up, and let's say I squat 800 pounds. So if you want to add volume without doing a whole lot of thinking, stop making plate jumps. Go quarter plate, quarter plate, quarter plate, quarter plate. So if I was going to squat 765 and that's 8 plates, you know, now instead of doing 8 sets of plates, like plate, 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 by going quarter plate, I'm doing 16 sets. I automatically added a ton of volume right into my training. Now, if I'm doing 16 sets, guess who has to do 16 sets also? The guy that squats 400 pounds. Why is that? Because how is a guy that squats 400 pounds going to catch an 800-pound squatter by doing less work? If he goes quarter plate, quarter plate, quarter plate at 4 plates, that's only 8 jumps or 8 sets. So you have to build more work into his capacity. So for me, we would always find 70 to 80%, somewhere in that range, and have those guys do a set for every set that we did. And guess what else they have to do? They would have to drop the weight. Now, when I was the new guy, young guy, weaker lifter, I was the guy loading all the plates, unloading the plates. And as you move up, you know, it's just a good way to build discipline and uniformity within a team. But also, that extra work is just good for you. You know, loading the plates, unloading the plates, loading the plates, unloading the plates. It humbles you, and it teaches you to respect the sport a little bit. And that's just always the way that we've done it. But make sure that if you're the weaker guy, you're not letting the bigger guy outwork you, because you need to be doing more to catch him. Nowhere in this sport will less be more, except at the end when you're peaking. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.